You smell it before you see it. The flying boat drops below the clouds on Christmas morning, 1941, and the first thing that hits you is the oil. 18 days old, and the harbor still reeks of burned fuel and something worse underneath it. Something sweet and chemical that you will not name because you know what it is. You are wearing a gray civilian suit. The President of the United States has ordered you not to wear your uniform. You are carrying a small leather suitcase. Your wife saw you off 4 days ago at a train station in Washington without crying, because she has been married to you for 30 years, and she knows what this is. The water below you is black, not dark. Black. Oil, 2 inches thick, still spreading outward from the hulls of ships that are no longer ships. The masts of battleships stick out of the harbor at angles that make your stomach tighten, because masts are not supposed to lean like that. The Oklahoma is upside down. The Arizona is gone. There is a film of ash on the surface of the water that moves when the wind moves, and underneath it they are still finding bodies. A young lieutenant meets you on the dock. He has not slept in 2 days. He does not know whether to salute you because you are not wearing a uniform. You take off your hat. You get into the car. You say nothing. You are 56 years old. You are a rear admiral, 2 stars. 9 days ago, you were sitting at a desk in Washington signing personnel papers. You have never commanded a fleet in combat. You have never commanded a carrier task force. You have never led a battle squadron at sea. You are a submarine man and a diesel engineer from a small town in the Texas Hill Country. By one account, 11 months ago, the president offered you this exact job. You turned it down. You told him you were too junior. If you had said yes, this morning it would be your fleet on the bottom of that harbor, your name on the cables. Your career finished, like the man who sat in this chair before you. Instead, you are here. By most counts, roughly 28 admirals senior to you have been passed over to find you. And there is one more thing. Buried in your service record, in the personnel files of the office you yourself run, is a court-martial conviction for running your first ship aground. Your name is Chester Nimitz, and the harbor is still burning. But to understand why Roosevelt chose him, you have to understand what this chair did to every man who sat in it before him. At 7:55 on the morning of December 7th, 1941, the first Japanese torpedo hits the water inside Pearl Harbor. 353 aircraft have come down out of the clouds above Oahu in 2 waves, launched from 6 carriers that crossed the Pacific without being detected. The anti-aircraft guns are unmanned. The ammunition lockers are locked. The ready planes on the airfields at Hickam and Wheeler and Bellows are parked wingtip to wingtip in neat rows, lined up for sabotage prevention, lined up like targets on a rifle range. The first torpedo strikes the USS Oklahoma, then another, then more, 5 at least, in rapid succession along her port side. The battleship rolls fast, faster than the men inside her can react, and within minutes she is upside down in the harbor mud, with 429 men trapped inside her hull in the dark. Across the harbor, on Battleship Row, the USS Arizona takes a single armor-piercing bomb that drops through her forward deck and finds the magazine. The explosion is so violent, it lifts the bow of the ship out of the water. A column of fire and black smoke rises more than 1,000 feet into the morning air. 1,177 men die aboard the Arizona. By 9 o'clock, it is over. 4 battleships are on the bottom of the harbor. A 5th is beached and burning. 3 more are damaged. 188 aircraft are destroyed, most of them on the ground. 2,403 Americans are dead. The most powerful naval base in the Pacific has been turned into a graveyard in less than 2 hours. The man who commands this fleet is watching it happen through the window of his office. Admiral husband Edward Kimmel is 59 years old. A career sailor from Henderson, Kentucky, meticulous, hard-working, respected by the men who serve under him. He has been at his desk since before 7. He is reading dispatches when the first explosions shake the building, and by the time he reaches the window, Battleship Row is already burning. At some point during the attack, a spent .50 caliber bullet crashes through the window of his office. It strikes him in the chest. It does not penetrate. It leaves a dark bruise on his white uniform and falls to the floor. Kimmel bends down. He picks the bullet up. He turns it over in his palm. He says, quietly, that it would have been merciful had it killed him. He understands what is happening, not just to the fleet, to him. His career is ending in this window. Every decision he has made, every patrol he did not order, every warning he misread, is now being paid for in the lives of men who trusted him. Kimmel was not a fool. He was not a coward. But he was the commander who failed to order long-range air reconnaissance patrols to the north and northwest of Oahu. He was the commander who kept his battleships packed tight together in the harbor. He was the commander who read the war warning cables from Washington as warnings of sabotage on land, rather than warnings of an air attack from the sea. He made decisions. The decisions were wrong. The price was paid by other men. This is the chair Chester Nimitz is about to sit in. This is the man whose shadow he will have to outlive. 4 days after the attack, Frank Knox arrives at Pearl Harbor. The Secretary of the Navy is 67 years old. A newspaper publisher, a Republican placed in Roosevelt's Democratic cabinet for bipartisan cover. Before he was a publisher, he was a soldier. He rode with Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders up San Juan Hill in 1898. He has seen war before. Knox walks through the wreckage himself. He stands on the docks above Battleship Row and looks down at oil-covered water where bodies are still being recovered. He walks through the burned hangars at Hickam Field, stepping over twisted metal, his shoes turning black with soot. He talks to the officers and the enlisted men and the yard workers. He flies back to Washington and tells the president that the Pacific Fleet does not just need a new commander. It needs a different kind of commander entirely. 6 days later, on December 17th, Kimmel is stripped of his command. He is reverted to his permanent rank of 2-star Rear Admiral. His career is over. There will be investigations, 8 of them eventually. Kimmel will spend the rest of his life trying to clear his name. He will not succeed while he is alive. The truth is more complicated than the public wants it to be. But Washington is not interested in complications. Washington needs a name. Kimmel's name fits. Someone has to command the Pacific Fleet now. Not next month. Now. The Japanese are not waiting. Vice Admiral William Satterley Pye steps in on a temporary basis. He is 61 years old. A cautious man by temperament. He does not want this command. It has been handed to him because he is the senior officer available. His first major decision will define his career, though he does not know it yet. A relief force is already steaming toward Wake Island. Marines have been holding the atoll for 2 weeks against overwhelming Japanese forces. Pye looks at the maps. He looks at the intelligence reports. He looks at his remaining carriers and calculates the risk. If the carriers are caught, if they are sunk, the Pacific Fleet will have nothing left. He recalls the relief force, 200 miles from the island, 200 miles from the Marines who are waiting for them. Wake Island falls to the Japanese on December 23rd. The garrison surrenders. The story will spread through the fleet like fire through dry timber. Pye will be quietly removed from any consideration for permanent command. 2 men have now held this chair. Both have been destroyed by it. The first lost his fleet and his reputation. The second lost an island and his nerve. The third is on a train heading west in a civilian suit, reading dispatches, and the news is getting worse with every mile. In Washington, Roosevelt has already made his decision. The list of candidates begins with roughly 28 flag officers, senior to the man he will choose. Each is considered. Each is set aside. The story that will emerge later is that every senior admiral refused the job. The truth is more careful than that. Roosevelt does not give anyone the chance to refuse. He passes over them one by one because every one of them carries a fingerprint on the disaster. This admiral signed off on the pre-war deployment plan. That one served on Kimmel's staff. Another recommended concentrating the fleet at Pearl Harbor in the first place. Roosevelt is not looking for a warrior. He has warriors. He is looking for a man who is clean, a man whose fingerprints are on nothing but personnel transfer orders. One name keeps surfacing. It is not a name anyone expects. By one account, in January of 1941, 11 months before the attack, Franklin Roosevelt had quietly offered this man the command of the Pacific Fleet, and this man turned it down. He told the president he was too junior, that the admirals senior to him would resent the promotion, that a decision like that would damage morale in the officer corps. He thanked the president. He asked to be considered some other time. He went back to his desk and kept signing personnel papers. If he had said yes in January, then on the morning of December 7th, it would have been his fleet in the harbor, his battleships on the bottom, his name on the cables, his career over, like Kimmel's. Instead, on the morning of December 7th, this man was at home with his wife in Washington, 2,000 miles from the disaster. His name was not on any of the cables. His fingerprints were not on any of the decisions. He was clean. His name was Chester Nimitz. The man whose name keeps surfacing in Washington is not what anyone expects. Chester William Nimitz is 56 years old. He is a rear admiral. 2 stars, no more. More. He runs the Bureau of Navigation, which despite its name has nothing to do with navigation. It is the personnel office of the entire United States Navy. He decides where officers are stationed. He approves promotions. He moves names around a board day after day in a quiet building in Washington, while other men command warships. He is not a surface warfare hero. He has not led a carrier task force. He has never commanded a battle squadron in combat. He is a submarine man and a diesel engineer, a Texan from a small hill country town called Fredericksburg, where his grandfather, a former German merchant sea captain, settled in the most landlocked corner of the state and built a steamboat-shaped hotel because he missed the ocean he would never see again. By almost every conventional measure, Chester Nimitz is the wrong man for the job. He is too junior. He is too quiet. He has spent the last 2 years behind a desk. The fleet commanders, the task force leaders, the men whose names appear in every war plan, they are all senior to him. They have sea commands. They have battle records. They have staffs that know how to fight. Nimitz has a filing cabinet and a fountain pen. But there is something about Chester Nimitz that Roosevelt has seen and that the Navy has not. It has to do with the way Nimitz listens, the way he does not react when other men would react, the way he asks one question when other men would ask 12. There is a stillness in him that is not passivity. It is the stillness of a man who has already finished thinking while everyone else is still talking. Roosevelt has read his fitness reports going back 30 years, and every one of them says the same thing in different words. Calm under pressure, sound judgment, does not seek attention, does not make enemies. In a Navy full of men who have made enemies, Chester Nimitz has made none. But there is something in his service record that no one in Washington is talking about. In May of 1908, a young ensign named Chester Nimitz was given command of his first vessel, the USS Decatur, a small destroyer assigned to the Asiatic Fleet. He was 23 years old. He had been out of the Naval Academy for 3 years. He had never commanded a ship before. 2 months later, on the evening of July 7th, 1908, Ensign Nimitz ran the Decatur aground on a mud bank in the harbor at Batangas, in the Philippine Islands. The ship was not seriously damaged. No one was hurt. But the Navy does not forgive carelessness with ships. Nimitz was court-martialed. He was found guilty of neglect of duty. He received a letter of reprimand, the lightest possible punishment, and he was allowed to remain in the Navy. But the conviction was never removed from his record. It followed him for 33 years. It was still there in December of 1941 when his name began to circulate in the White House. The man being considered to lead the United States Navy out of the worst defeat in its history had once been convicted of wrecking his first command. Nimitz never hid the Decatur. He never tried to have the record expunged. When asked about it in later years, he said simply that it taught him more about command than any success ever had. That a man who has never made a serious mistake has never been tested, and that a man who has survived the testing knows something about himself that no peacetime service can teach. What Nimitz learned from the Decatur, the habit of checking every detail himself, of walking the deck and looking at the water with his own eyes before trusting a chart, would define every decision he made for the next 4 years. On the morning of December 16th, 1941, 9 days after the attack, Rear Admiral Chester Nimitz is working at his desk when a message arrives. The Secretary of the Navy wants to see him immediately. He walks down the corridor in his blue uniform. He is quiet, the way he is always quiet. The hallway around him is not. The country has been at war for 9 days, and the building has not yet learned how to be calm. Nimitz enters the office of Frank Knox. Knox does not ease into it. He never does. The Pacific Fleet needs a new commander. The President has chosen him. The appointment is effective immediately. Nimitz says nothing for a moment. He is 56 years old. He has spent his entire career being passed over for the dramatic commands. He has built submarines. He has trained engineers. He has signed personnel papers in a quiet building while the war he knew was coming arrived without him. The job he had turned down 11 months earlier was now the only job left. The two men who held the chair before him had both been destroyed by it. The chair was empty, and the country needed someone to sit in it before the next disaster arrived. Nimitz looks at Knox. He asks one question. He asks when he should leave. The train pulls out of Union Station at 5 in the afternoon. On December 19th, 1941, Chester Nimitz is not wearing a uniform. The president has ordered him to travel in civilian clothes. Roosevelt does not want the new commander of the Pacific Fleet announced from a railway platform. He wants Nimitz to arrive the way a doctor arrives at a bedside, quietly, without cameras. Before anyone has time to argue, Nimitz boards the train in a grey suit and a dark hat. He carries a small leather suitcase. His wife, Catherine, sees him off on the platform. They have been married 30 years. She does not cry. She knows what this is. 4 days the journey takes. 4 days across a country that has just discovered what war means. Nimitz sleeps badly. He reads dispatches at every stop. The news gets worse with every mile. Wake Island has fallen. Manila is being bombed. The British battleships, Prince of Wales and Repulse, have been sunk off the coast of Malaya by Japanese aircraft in open ocean in a single afternoon. 2 capital ships destroyed by airplanes before they could bring their guns to bear. The lesson is plain. The age of the battleship is over. Surface fleets without air cover are targets, not weapons. Nimitz is on his way to take command of a fleet that was built around battleships, and he already knows that the battleships are gone. In Washington, behind him, the man who does not believe in him is already at work. Admiral Ernest Joseph King is 63 years old. Within days, Roosevelt will appoint him Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet. King is tall, lean, severe, famously without humor or patience. He drinks hard. He does not forgive. The officers who serve under him say that Ernest King shaves with a blowtorch. King has spent the past week studying Chester Nimitz, and he has reached his verdict. A desk admiral, a bureaucrat, a man who has spent 2 years pushing paper in a personnel office, a man who has never commanded a fleet in combat. The man Roosevelt has chosen to lead the United States Navy against the most aggressive military power in Asia is, in Ernest King's estimation, a clerk. King does not say this to the president. He says it to his staff. He says it to the admirals who pass through his office. He says it to anyone who will listen. It will take more than a year for King to change his mind. Some historians believe he never fully does. Nimitz knows this. He knows that the most powerful admiral in Washington considers him unfit. He knows that the fleet he is about to command does not know him, does not trust him, and has no reason to. He knows that the officers waiting for him at Pearl Harbor are exhausted, demoralized, and expecting to be fired. He also knows that none of this matters if he cannot look at Pearl Harbor and see something other than defeat. The PB-2Y Coronado flying boat lifts off from San Diego on Christmas Eve and turns west into the Pacific darkness. Nimitz sits in the cabin with his dispatches and his leather suitcase. He does not sleep. He arrives at Pearl Harbor at 7 in the morning on Christmas Day, 1941. The drive from the dock to fleet headquarters takes 15 minutes. What Nimitz sees through the window of that car is not what the photographs will later show. The photographs will show the broken battleships. The newsreels will show the fire and the twisted steel. The country will be told, again and again, what was lost. Chester Nimitz, alone in the back of that car on Christmas morning, is one of the only men in America looking at what was not lost. The fuel tank farm sits a quarter-mile from Battleship Row, above the harbor, on a low rise. 4.5 million barrels of fuel oil are stored there, enough to run the entire Pacific Fleet for a year and a half. The Japanese pilots saw the tanks. They had photographs of them. They did not bomb them. If they had destroyed those tanks, the Pacific Fleet would have had to withdraw to the west coast. The war in the Pacific would have been set back by years. The submarine base, with its piers and workshops and torpedo storage, stands untouched along the southeast lock. 22 American submarines are based there. None of them were hit. Within months, those submarines will begin a campaign against Japanese merchant shipping that will eventually strangle the Japanese home islands. The dry docks, the machine shop, the cranes, the repair yards, everything the Navy will need to raise the battleships off the harbor floor, all of it is intact. The Japanese struck the fleet. They did not strike the base that supports the fleet. And every aircraft carrier in the Pacific Fleet, every single one, was at sea on December 7th. The Enterprise was returning from Wake Island. The Lexington was steaming toward Midway. The Saratoga was on the west coast. None of them were in the harbor when the bombs fell. The Japanese sank an old navy. They did not touch the new one. This is what Nimitz sees, not because he is an optimist, because he is an engineer. Engineers do not look at wreckage and feel hope. They look at wreckage and count the parts that still work. 6 days later, on the last day of 1941, the change of command ceremony is held. In peacetime, it would take place on the quarterdeck of the fleet flagship, the largest battleship in the harbor. There are no battleships available, so they hold the ceremony on the deck of the USS Grayling, a fleet submarine, 1,475 tons, low and narrow in the water. A cold December rain blows across her hull. Nimitz climbs the ladder onto the conning tower. He is now Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, 4 stars, Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet. He reads his orders aloud in a flat, quiet voice. He does not give a speech. He does not promise vengeance. He salutes the men, climbs down, and the ceremony is over in minutes. A submarine commander taking command of a fleet that has just been destroyed by airplanes on the deck of a submarine, because the surface ships are on the bottom of the harbor. His first decision shocks Washington. The staff officers who served under Kimmel are still at their desks. They have been waiting for the axe. Captain Edwin Layton, 38 years old, the fleet intelligence officer, a Japanese linguist who spent nearly 2 years as assistant naval attaché in Tokyo. He knows the Japanese Navy by name. Captain Charles McMorris, 51 years old, the war plans officer, known as SOX, short for Socrates, for his habit of reasoning through every problem aloud. Both expect to be fired. They have packed their bags. Nimitz calls them into his office on the morning of January 1st, 1942. He tells them that any officer who wants a transfer will receive one. With his full support, and a personal letter of recommendation. The door is open, but he hopes none of them will walk through it. They know this theater, he tells them. They know this enemy. They know what happened on December 7th in a way that no officer Washington could send would ever understand. He needs men who know more than he does, and he is not too proud to say so. Every single one of them stays. In Washington, when the news reaches Knox, the secretary is reported to have set down his pen and stared at the wall. The country is screaming for blood. Congress wants hearings. The newspapers want names. And the new commander of the Pacific Fleet has just refused to fire anyone. It is a decision that, if it goes wrong, will destroy him faster than Pearl Harbor destroyed Kimmel. The men who were almost fired now report to a commander who chose them. Leighton will become one of the most important intelligence officers in American military history. McMorris will plan every major fleet operation in the Pacific for the next 2 years. They will work harder than they have ever worked, not because they are ordered to, but because they have been trusted by a man who had every reason not to trust them. And they will do something else. They will take him down into a basement. The basement is in the headquarters building of the 14th Naval District at Pearl Harbor. It has no windows. The fluorescent lights buzz day and night. The air smells of cigarette smoke and stale coffee and unwashed bodies because the men who work there do not go home often enough to bathe. This is Station Hypo, the Combat Intelligence Unit, the Code Breakers. The man who runs it is Commander Joseph John Rochefort. He is 41 years old. He is one of the most unusual officers in the United States Navy. He works in a red velvet smoking jacket and carpet slippers. He has not seen the sun in 3 weeks. He keeps a card index of every Japanese naval radio call sign his unit has ever intercepted, going back 5 years, and he can recall any of them from memory. He speaks Japanese fluently. He drinks coffee until his hands shake. He once forgot to go home for 4 days. He is working on JN-25, the Japanese Imperial Navy's main operational code. It is a 5-digit super-enciphered system, one of the most complex cryptographic systems in the world. His team has cracked approximately 15% of it. 15% does not sound like much. It is enough. Nimitz comes down into the basement in early January. The new 4-star admiral in a fresh khaki uniform descends a stairwell into a dim, smoke-filled room where men in bathrobes sit hunched over worksheets covered in 5-digit number groups. He shakes Rochefort's hand. He says simply that he has heard good things. He stays for an hour. He listens. He does not pretend to understand the cryptanalysis. He asks one kind of question only. He asks what the Japanese are going to do next. What Nimitz decides in that hour will determine the course of the Pacific War. He decides to believe Rochefort. That sounds like nothing. It is everything. Because 3,000 miles away in Washington, there is another Navy code-breaking unit, OP-20G, run by Captain John Redman and his brother, Captain Joseph Redman. The Redmans are well connected. They have the ear of Admiral King. They believe their analysis of Japanese intentions is superior to Rochefort's, in part because Rochefort outranks neither of them and refuses to defer to either of them. The fight between Washington and Pearl Harbor over what the Japanese are about to do will become the bitterest intelligence dispute of the entire war. Nimitz chooses the man in the smoking jacket over the men with connections in Washington. He chooses the man who smells like coffee and cigarettes over the men who have lunch with Admiral King. It is not a popular choice. It is the right one. For the first 4 months of 1942, the Japanese sweep through the Southwest Pacific almost unopposed. The Dutch East Indies fall. Singapore surrenders. Burma collapses. In the Philippines, General Douglas MacArthur is ordered to abandon his men on Corregidor and escape to Australia. The American garrison at Bataan surrenders and begins a death march that will kill thousands. Nimitz is fighting a holding action with 3 carriers. He sends them out on raids. The Marshalls, the Gilberts, Wake Island, Marcus Island. These raids accomplish almost nothing tactically. A few planes destroyed, a few supply dumps burned. The damage is minor. The risk is enormous. Every time Nimitz sends a carrier into Japanese waters, he is gambling that he will not lose it, because losing a single carrier would cut his striking power by 1/3. He sends them anyway. He knows the raids are not about destroying targets. They are about reminding the American public that the Pacific Fleet still exists. King wants more. King always wants more. He wants Nimitz to attack harder, strike deeper. The tension between the 2 men runs beneath the surface of every dispatch. King pushes. Nimitz absorbs. King demands. Nimitz complies just enough to keep King from overruling him and not 1 ship more. Nimitz is buying time, and the thing he is buying time for is in the basement at Pearl Harbor, where Roosevelt and his team are slowly breaking deeper into the Japanese naval code. In April, 16 B-25 medium bombers launch from the deck of the USS Hornet under Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle and strike Tokyo. The material damage is minimal, but the raid changes the war. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the commander of the Japanese Combined Fleet, takes the Doolittle raid as a personal failure. American bombers have struck the homeland. The Emperor has been put at risk. Yamamoto decides the American carriers must be destroyed. He begins planning an operation to draw the remaining American carrier force into a decisive battle. The target is a small coral atoll 1,200 miles northwest of Honolulu, Midway. This is what Nimitz has been waiting for. Not Midway specifically, but a moment when the Japanese overreach. A moment when Yamamoto extends his fleet beyond the range of his land-based air cover. Nimitz has been buying time for exactly this kind of opportunity, and Roosevelt is about to hand it to him. In early May, 2 of Nimitz's carriers fight a Japanese task force in the Coral Sea. It is the first naval battle in history where the opposing fleets never see each other. The entire engagement is fought by aircraft. The Lexington is sunk. The Yorktown takes a 250-kilogram bomb deep inside her hull, fires on 4 decks. She limps back to Pearl Harbor on May 27th, trailing oil. Nimitz now has 2 operational carriers, Enterprise and Hornet, and Roosevelt is telling him that the Japanese are coming with 4 fleet carriers, the same ships that struck Pearl Harbor. The shipyard inspectors go aboard the Yorktown in dry dock. They walk her decks. They climb into her shattered interior. They come back to Nimitz with their report. 3 months, 90 days, at full effort at minimum. Nimitz reads the report. He does not argue with the inspectors. He thanks them. Then he goes down to the dry dock himself. In his khaki uniform, he walks the same decks the inspectors walked. He climbs into the same burned interior. He stands in the same buckled compartments. He looks at the same warped steel. He is an engineer. He has spent more years below the waterline of ships than most admirals have spent above it. He knows what damaged steel looks like. He knows the difference between a ship that is ready for sea and a ship that is ready for battle. And he knows that right now he does not need perfection. He needs the Yorktown to float, to steam, and to launch aircraft. He turns to the chief of the shipyard. He says they need the Yorktown in 3 days. Not 90. 72 hours. The shipyard works around the clock. Welders are pulled off every other project. Floodlights are rigged over the dry dock. By some accounts, as many as 1,400 men work in shifts that blur into one continuous effort, eating sandwiches at their stations, sleeping on the deck plates when they sleep at all. They do not replace the damaged frames. They weld steel plates over the buckled bulkheads and brace them with timber. They do not rewire the ship. They reroute the circuits. They do not rebuild the interior. They seal what cannot be repaired and restore what can. On May 30th, the Yorktown sails out of Pearl Harbor under her own power. The welders are still working as she clears the channel. Sparks trail down her hull. She is not fully repaired, but she can steam, she can launch aircraft, and she is heading toward a battle that most of Washington still does not believe is going to happen. Because Washington still does not believe Roosevelt. The Redman brothers in OP-20G have told Admiral King that the next Japanese offensive will not be directed at Midway. They say it could be the West Coast, or the Aleutians, or Hawaii. King is inclined to believe them. Roosevelt and his team have intercepted dozens of references to a target the Japanese call AF. Roosevelt believes AF is Midway. Washington says it is not. So Roosevelt sets a trap. With Nimitz's knowledge, he sends a secure message to the garrison at Midway through the undersea cable. The garrison is instructed to transmit in plain language on an open radio frequency that the freshwater distillation plant has broken down. The message goes out. Roosevelt waits. 48 hours later, a Japanese signals intelligence station in the Marshall Islands transmits a coded message back to Tokyo, reporting that AF is short of fresh water. AF is Midway. Roosevelt takes the decoded intercept to Nimitz. He lays it on the desk. Nimitz reads it. He asks Roosevelt how confident he is. Roosevelt tells him he would stake his career on it. Nimitz tells him quietly that they are both already staking their careers on it. If Roosevelt is wrong, if the Japanese strike somewhere else while the American carriers are at the wrong island, then Nimitz will be the third commander of the Pacific Fleet to be destroyed by this chair. Nimitz does not hesitate. He gives the order. Every available carrier, every escort, every aircraft, every submarine is to position itself northeast of Midway in ambush and wait. While Roosevelt's trap was being confirmed, another problem arrived at Pearl Harbor, and this one came on a stretcher. Vice Admiral William Halsey returns from the South Pacific on May 26th. He goes straight to the Naval Hospital. He cannot walk without pain. He can barely stand. Halsey is 59 years old. He has been at sea almost continuously since the war began. The stress of continuous combat command has done what no enemy pilot could do. It has broken his body. He has a severe dermatitis that the doctors believe is shingles. The rash covers most of his body. He cannot wear a uniform without pain. He cannot sleep more than an hour. The doctors give him a single order: bed rest, at least 1 month. 1 month. The battle for Midway is less than 10 days away. Halsey, in his hospital bed, covered in welts, asks Nimitz to come and see him. When Nimitz arrives, Halsey does not waste time on his condition. He says 2 words: take Spruance. Rear Admiral Raymond Ames Spruance is 55 years old. He commands Halsey's cruiser screening force. He is a surface warfare officer. He has never commanded an aircraft carrier. He has never run a carrier air group. He has never directed a strike from a flight deck. He is quiet, thin, precise, and in almost every visible way, the exact opposite of the man recommending him. This is the man Halsey, from a hospital bed, in great pain, trusts with the most important naval engagement of the war. Not a carrier admiral, a cruiser commander who has never launched a strike aircraft in his life. Nimitz agrees on the spot. He does not consult Washington. He does not ask King. He takes the recommendation of a man covered in welts who cannot stand up, and he gives that man's fleet to an officer who has never done the job before. It is the 4th consecutive gamble Chester Nimitz has made in less than a month. He has bet on Roosevelt against Washington. He has bet on the Yorktown against the inspectors. He has bet the fleet on Midway against King. And now he has bet the battle on Spruance against every convention the Navy has ever held about who commands carrier task forces. 3 men carry the weight of the United States Navy. Roosevelt, who has staked his career on 2 letters in a Japanese codebook. Spruance, who has been given a job he has never done by a friend, who cannot leave his hospital bed. And Nimitz, who has chosen both of them and will answer for both of them if either one is wrong. Yamamoto's combined force is already at sea. 4 fleet carriers, 7 battleships in the main body trailing far behind. More than 240 aircraft aboard the carriers. He believes the Americans have at most 2 carriers operational in the Pacific. He is wrong. Chester Nimitz has 3. On the night before the battle, the American carriers steam under a dark sky 200 miles northeast of Midway. The crews know what is coming. They know the Japanese have 4 carriers. They know the Americans have 3. They have been told that everything depends on the next 48 hours. In his headquarters at Pearl Harbor, 3,000 miles from the battle, Chester Nimitz waits. He has done everything he can. He has chosen the intelligence. He has chosen the commanders. He has repaired the ship. He has positioned the fleet. Now there is nothing left but to sit at a desk and read the dispatches as they come in. This is the particular cruelty of high command. The men who make the decisions are never the men who carry them out. Nimitz will not fly a torpedo bomber into anti-aircraft fire. He will not dive on a Japanese carrier from 12,000 feet. He will sit in a quiet room and read pieces of paper that tell him how many of his men are dying. The morning of June 4th, 1942, a PB Catalina on patrol northwest of Midway breaks radio silence at 5:34 in the morning. 2 words: many planes. Roosevelt was right. The Japanese hit Midway at 6:30. The Marine garrison fights back with anti-aircraft fire. The American fighter pilots defending the island are flying Brewster Buffaloes, obsolete aircraft that were outclassed before the war began. 25 Marine fighters go up. 10 come back. Most are too damaged to fly again. Spruance launches everything. Every torpedo bomber, every dive bomber, every fighter his carriers can put into the air. The Yorktown holds her aircraft in reserve. The first American squadron to find the Japanese fleet is Torpedo Squadron 8, flying off the Hornet. 15 TBD Devastator torpedo bombers. Slow, heavy, obsolete, with a torpedo that is unreliable and a top speed a zero can exceed by more than 100 miles an hour. They go in without fighter escort. Their commander is Lieutenant Commander John Waldron. He is 41 years old. A career officer, part Lakota Sioux, fierce and plain-spoken. He has told his men the night before that some of them are not coming back. He has told them to press home their attacks regardless. Waldron navigates toward the Japanese fleet by dead reckoning when the air group commander takes a different heading. Waldron is right about the course. He is also right about what happens next. All 15 of his planes are shot down. The Japanese Combat Air Patrol falls on them before they can release their torpedoes. Of the 30 men in those aircraft, 29 die. One man survives. Ensign George Gay, 25 years old, who floats in the Pacific, clinging to a rubber seat cushion, watching the battle happen above him. Torpedo Squadron 6 from the Enterprise comes in next. 14 aircraft, 10 shot down. Torpedo Squadron 3 from the Yorktown follows. 12 aircraft, 10 shot down. In less than an hour, the American torpedo bombers have been nearly annihilated. Not a single torpedo has found its target. The dispatches reach Nimitz at Pearl Harbor in fragments. Torpedo squadrons engaged. Heavy losses. No hits reported. An entire generation of torpedo bomber crews, men Nimitz, sent into battle on the strength of a codebreaker's word, are dying in the water 1,000 miles away. And they have accomplished nothing. But they have accomplished something no one at Pearl Harbor can see yet. The Japanese Zero fighters have chased the torpedo bombers to wave top level. Every fighter in the Combat Air Patrol is at sea level. The sky above the Japanese carriers is empty. At 12,000 feet, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey leads the dive bomber squadrons of the Enterprise. He has been searching for the Japanese fleet for over an hour. He is running out of fuel. He is minutes from turning home when he sees, far below the white line of a wake, a single Japanese destroyer running northeast at full speed. McCluskey guesses the destroyer is racing to rejoin the main body. He follows it. It leads him to Yamamoto's carriers. At nearly the same moment, by coincidence or by something no historian has ever fully explained, the dive bombers of Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie from the Yorktown arrive from the opposite direction. Two separate squadrons, launched from two separate carriers, find the same targets within minutes of each other. The Japanese carriers are caught at the worst possible moment. Flight decks crowded, with aircraft being refueled and rearmed. Aviation fuel hoses uncoiled across the deck. Bombs and torpedoes stacked in the open. The Combat Air Patrol at sea level. In a window between 10:22 and 10:31 in the morning, the Pacific War changes. McCluskey's bombers hit the Kaga. She becomes a torch 1,000 feet long. The Akagi takes a bomb through her flight deck into the hangar below, where fueled aircraft are waiting. She erupts from the inside. Leslie's squadron hits the Soryu. 3 direct hits. She burns from bow to stern. 3 Japanese fleet carriers. 3 of the 6 ships that struck Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier. all on fire, all dying. At Pearl Harbor, the dispatches change. 3 enemy carriers hit, fires observed. Nimitz reads the dispatches. He does not celebrate. There is a 4th carrier. The Hiryu, 20 miles north, is still untouched. She launches everything. At noon, her dive bombers find the Yorktown, the ship that should have been in dry dock for 3 months. The ship that Nimitz ordered, rebuilt in 72 hours. 3 bombs hit her. She stops dead. 2 hours later, Japanese torpedo bombers find the crippled Yorktown. 2 torpedoes hit her port side. She lists to 26 degrees. The order is given to abandon ship. In the late afternoon, American dive bombers find the Hiryu. 4 bombs into her flight deck. She burns through the night. At dawn, her crew sets the scuttling charges. 4 Japanese fleet carriers sunk. The heavy cruiser Mikuma destroyed. 248 aircraft gone. More than 3,000 Japanese sailors and airmen dead. Japan will never recover the pilots. The men who died at Midway were the most experienced naval aviators in the Japanese Navy, irreplaceable veterans of Pearl Harbor and the campaigns across the Pacific. The Japanese training pipeline is too slow to replace them. From this morning forward, the strategic initiative in the Pacific belongs permanently to the United States. The Yorktown is still afloat on June 6th. A salvage crew reboards her. On the afternoon of June 6th, a Japanese submarine, the I-168, slips through the destroyer screen and puts 2 torpedoes into her side. The destroyer Hammond, lashed alongside, takes a 3rd torpedo. She breaks in half and sinks in minutes. Yorktown rolls over through the night and goes under at dawn on June 7th. The price of Midway on the American side: 1 fleet carrier, 1 destroyer, 150 aircraft, 307 men. Nimitz writes a personal message to the family of every officer killed under his command. He writes some of the names by hand. The country wants a parade. Nimitz writes condolence letters. King sends a single telegram. He congratulates the Pacific Fleet on a complete victory. He does not mention Joseph Rochefort. 4 months later, in October of 1942, the men around King make their move. Joseph Rochefort, the code breaker who identified Midway, the man who set the freshwater trap, the man who handed the United States Navy the most decisive victory at sea since Trafalgar, is quietly relieved of his command at Station Hypo. The Redmond brothers, the rival cryptanalysts whose analysis had been wrong, whose formal assessment to King had stated with confidence that the next offensive would not be Midway, persuade King that all naval intelligence work should be centralized under their authority in Washington. Rochefort outranks neither of them. Rochefort has never played the political game. He has never cultivated powerful friends. He has never attended the right dinners or positioned himself in the right corridors. He is a man who works in a basement, in a smoking jacket, and he has no defense against men who work in offices, in pressed uniforms. He is reassigned to command a floating dry dock in San Francisco Bay. A floating dry dock, a steel platform for repairing damaged hulls. For the man who broke the Japanese code and made Midway possible, the Navy's reward is a barge. Nimitz protests. He writes 2 formal letters objecting to the reassignment. He argues that Rochefort is indispensable, that removing him will damage the Navy's ability to read Japanese intentions at the most critical moment of the war. He is overruled. Both times, King signs the order, and Rochefort goes. This is the limit of Chester Nimitz's power. He can choose the right man. He can trust the right intelligence. He can bet his fleet and his career on the word of a codebreaker in carpet slippers. He can win the most important naval battle in a century, but he cannot protect that code breaker from the politics of Washington. He can win the war in the Pacific. He cannot win the war in the Navy Department. Rochefort accepts the reassignment without complaint. He commands the floating dry dock for the rest of the war, competently and quietly. He is recommended for the Distinguished Service Medal in 1942 for his work at Station Hypo. The recommendation is buried. He is recommended again in 1958. It is buried again. Joseph Rochefort dies in 1976 in a small house in Torrance, California. He is 76 years old. He has never received official recognition for what he did in that basement at Pearl Harbor. The medal is finally awarded 10 years after his death. In 1986, President Ronald Reagan presents the Distinguished Service Medal to Rochefort's family in a ceremony that Rochefort never lived to see. This is what the Pacific War does to the men who win it. The war goes on for 3 more years. Nimitz commands every major operation. Guadalcanal, where Marines fight in the jungle for 6 months, and the Navy loses more ships than it lost at Pearl Harbor. Tarawa, where 1,000 Marines die on a coral reef in 76 hours. Saipan, the Philippine Sea. Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Iwo Jima, Okinawa. He loses more carriers. The Wasp, the Hornet, the Liscum Bay, the Princeton, the St. Lo. He sends more men to die on more islands than any American commander in history. He does not give speeches. He does not appear on newsreels. He does not pose for cameras. He writes letters home to his wife, Catherine, every week, in the same quiet, careful handwriting he has used all his life. By the end of 1944, the Pacific Fleet under Nimitz's command is the largest naval force ever assembled by any nation in history. 5,000 ships, 20,000 aircraft, 2 million men and women in uniform. In December of 1944, Chester Nimitz is promoted to Fleet Admiral, 5 stars, a rank held in the entire history of the United States Navy by exactly 4 men. On the morning of September 2nd, 1945, a battleship lies at anchor in Tokyo Bay, the USS Missouri. The Japanese delegation comes aboard in formal morning dress. The instruments of surrender are laid out on a small wooden table covered with green felt. General Douglas MacArthur signs first as Supreme Commander of the Allied powers. Then it is Nimitz's turn. He steps forward. He is 60 years old. 5 stars on his collar. He picks up the pen. He signs for the United States of America in the same flat, neat handwriting he has used all his life. The man who took command of the Pacific Fleet on the deck of a submarine because there were no battleships left, ends the war on the deck of a battleship because there is no enemy left. In the years after, when the interviewers came, when the historians came, when the men with notebooks asked Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz about Pearl Harbor, about that Christmas morning in 1941, his answer was not what they expected. He did not talk about the tragedy. He did not talk about the anger or the determination. He told them it was a mercy. He told them that if Admiral Kimmel had known the Japanese were coming, he would have taken the fleet to sea. The battleships would have sailed into the open Pacific, into the path of Nagumo's carriers, slow and exposed, without air cover, against an enemy that had already proved what aircraft could do to battleships. They would have been sunk in 2,000 fathoms. The crews, tens of thousands of men, would have drowned. Instead, at Pearl Harbor, the water was 40 feet deep. The ships settled into the mud. The men were pulled from the oil. 6 of the 8 battleships, sunk or damaged on December 7th, were eventually raised, repaired in the shipyards that the Japanese had failed to destroy, and returned to service. They sailed again. Some of them were anchored in Tokyo Bay on the morning. Nimitz signed the surrender. The fleet the Japanese destroyed was the fleet that would have lost the war. The fleet they failed to destroy was the fleet that won it. Chester Nimitz saw this clearly. He had seen it on that first morning. While everyone else counted the dead, he had counted what survived. He was the man every admiral senior to him had been passed over to find. A submarine officer who took command of a battleship navy from the deck of a submarine. A quiet Texan from a landlocked town who never raised his voice, never gave the speech that made the front page, never posed for the photograph that won the prize. A man who had once been court-martialed for wrecking his first command, and who spent the rest of his life making sure he never wrecked anything again. The harbor is not burning anymore, but the question it asked on that Christmas morning is still worth asking. What do you see when everything around you is destroyed? What is left? And who is the man who sees it?